Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our meeting for the 14th of July. First of all, I'd like to go through the fire regs. There's no notification of any evacuation, so if you hear the alarm go, please make your way through the door, open to the main car park, and we'll all be safe. If you forgive my voice, I don't like this weather at all. It doesn't suit my not asthma, but what's the other one? That hay fever, that's the one, yeah. And the first item on the agenda is apologies and absence.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Chapman, Froggatt, Hobson, Ratcliffe and Swindle.
Thank you very much. And item number 2 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Can I have a proposal, please? Have a proposer? Councillor Atkin, seconder? Councillor Hughes, thank you very much. All those in favour? Unanimous? Yeah. Thank you very much. Item number 3, public participation. We've got 4 speakers tonight, and the first one to speak is Miss Sharon Shirley, local resident, to comment on the report. Thank you.
I'm actually not going to say or read any statement out today. I'm just going to play you a very short video, 2-minute video about our Stockholm allotment.
Look forward to that, thank you.
Will you search through the lonely earth for me? Climb through the briar and bramble. I'll be your treasure. I felt the touch of the kings and the breath of the wind. I knew the call of all the songbirds. They sang all the wrong words. I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. Swim through the briny sea for me, crawl along the ocean's floor. I'll be your treasure. I'm with the ghosts of the men who can never sing again. There's a place, follow me, where a love lost at sea is waiting for you, is waiting for you.
I love the music, that's brilliant. Yeah, great. And our next speaker is Miss Barbara Marriott, local resident, speak. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll let you know what 30 seconds left, yeah.
Right. I come not as an allotment holder, but a representative of Stockholm's community, where I've lived for almost 50 years. I've been speaking to very many residents, and the anger they feel about losing the allotments and the alarm about the possibility of also losing part of the playing fields is intense. They cannot believe our council will allow such a thing to happen. The proposal to relocate the allotment to the Village Hall playing field was put forward not by the community, but by the landowner himself. He does not own that field and is not even a Stockholm's resident. He therefore has no jurisdiction over the future of the playing fields. However, his proposal has now been taken up and promoted by our MP, Sarah Dines, and by some councillors. Secondly, It has also been suggested in some newspaper articles that the playing field has been offered to the allotment holders, and this is simply not true and has certainly not been suggested by Stockholm's villagers. The council has carried out 2 community consultations in the last 2 years, the second one in response to the landowner's proposal. Both consultations favoured continued use for the community. The second consultation, which specifically mentioned the idea of moving the allotment to the village hall playing fields, showed very clearly that this did not meet approval. 79% of respondents voted no to this proposal. So my question is, why is this proposal still being promoted as a viable option by our MP and some of our councillors? Because it is not an option. The playing fields have been a valuable asset for 75 years since the village hall was built after the Second World War. Although the top part of the field has been allowed to go wild with brambles, it was and is still widely used. On gala days, family fun days, the brownies and the guides use it, local children play football, little ones use the playground, many jog there, people walk their dogs, and in the winter the slope is used for sledging. At weddings and parties, the back doors of the hall are open for children to play out and photos taken, so how can even part of it be used as allotments? What a loss this would be to the wider community. The top part, which Sarah Dines is so enthusiastic about using, is totally unsuitable for allotments. To even get it cleared will mean diggers accessing and the playing fields being churned up. A track will need to be laid for the holders to reach the plots, and there is no water, so all that will have to be carried up. They will want vehicular access, and that will make it unsafe for users of the field. The landowner will wreck our village if this proposal goes ahead. I am sympathetic to those allotment holders who just want an allotment anywhere. So many have had them for years, and the prospect of losing them is heartbreaking. But the village hall field is not the alternative. We beg Derbyshire Dales District Council will see fit to push for the safe retention of the playing field and the allotments and support the community in their democratic campaign to assure this happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll turn this off.
And then the next speaker is Mary Derrick, another resident to speak and make comment on the report. You've got 3 minutes. I'll continue with 30 seconds left.
I am talking today as the Secretary of Stockholm's Allotment Association. Firstly, thank you for your work so far in listing and defending the ACV. However, my main message to you is, have you done everything you can as individuals, councillors and officers within your powers to help our community retain these historical allotments? You will be called upon to vote on motions that, if passed, will form important steps to helping. We need you to agree with the recommendations presented by Tim Bond. Firstly, please approve a supplementary revenue budget of £15,000 for the cost associated with defending the asset of community value. Secondly, please agree to undertake a community asset transfer of the site adjacent to the allotments. Stockholm's Allotment Association agree with the local community that this village space should remain available for use by many. The Allotment Association is not in agreement with their landlord's proposal to relocate plots to the village playing fields. It is not a viable option and not in the interest of the community. The compulsory purchase order instructed by Matlock Town Council will be noted in the meeting. The legal responsibility lies with the Parish Council to trigger the CPO. Stockholm's Allotment Association are making serious efforts to financially support the process. Please can Derbyshire Dales District Council also unite with us and other stakeholders by making a financial contribution to the Fighting Fund. So together we leave a legacy for our community. In addition, we would like the councillors to authorise prioritisation of officers' time to both defend the ACV and ensure the CPO application process is expedited. There are 53 working days over a busy holiday period to attend the CPO application before we are evicted from our plots. You first considered our request to start a CPO at this meeting 10 months ago. Sadly, much time has passed. Finally, in my view, there should be a law to protect private established allotments from falling victim to business opportunities that do not benefit the community. Perhaps in Sarah Dines' new position, she could consider this. In the meantime, please appeal to Sarah Dines MP to offer her active and sincere support so she too can be seen to be doing her best to save Stockholm's allotments. We have much evidence available to us now to show that any development on the existing site would be unwise and that the only suitable purpose for this land is for allotments, particularly due to the extensive mining structures beneath it. Ask yourself, are you doing enough? And by all means stop and say hello.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Councillor David Hughes. You've got 5 minutes, David, as you know the rules, and we'll let you know when you're 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking as the Ward Councillor for Matlock St Giles, which includes Stockholm, and as the Environment Lead for Matlock Town Council, in support of Item 5, Recommendation 4, that work should continue to undertake a community asset transfer of the site adjacent to the Stockholm allotments to Matlock Town Council, and that work should be recommenced. Stockholm is an important part of Matlock, yet it is a village in its own right, with its own distinct identity and community. The green space and play area behind the village hall and adjacent to the allotments, like the hall itself, has been an essential amenity for all Stockholm's residents for at least 70 years, acting as Stockholm's village green and hosting many community events. Stockholm's residents have sent me photographs of village events that have taken place there from the 1950s to the present day. The Stockholm's Village Fun Day, held in 2014, is one example, with numerous attractions on the village green, including children's gymnastics, medieval stocks, a penalty shootout, village royalty parade, children's rides, and so on. This is just one example, with similar events happening in most years, often as this year on a date near the Queen's Jubilee. One event from the 1950s featured maypole dancing. Another event featured archery. The village green hosts many informal uses as well as these formal occasions. Children, and adults for that matter, use it for tobogganing. Dogs are exercised, informal games are played on the flatter parts of the green, and people take gentle strolls with their neighbours of an evening. To best understand what the community wants from the green open space, Matlock Town Council conducted 2 surveys of residents' opinions about its future use, one in 2021 and one in 2022. Done online, both surveys recorded at least 150 responses with consistent results, showing that the continued use of the space for village events, informal play and recreation, was the most important, with the use of parts as a wildflower meadow and as a community orchard were also popular. The message we councillors received from the surveys was that the green open space was valued by the community and that the vast majority, wanted it to remain largely as it is now, but with some additional light management. I would like to draw your attention to the results of the second survey, which was carried out because the landowner had proposed using the village green for allotments. 79% of all respondents favoured an open space for village event. 44% favoured a wildflower meadow. 41% favoured a community orchard. 31% of Stockholm's respondents favoured use as allotments, with 38% overall, but 22 responses were from a single internet address, probably located in or near Leicester. Please note also that this historic use of the land and residents' preferences are consistent with its use under Local Plan Policy HC14, which states that the District Council will seek to protect, maintain, and where possible enhance existing open spaces, sport and recreational buildings and land, including playing fields, in order to ensure their continued contribution to the health and well-being of local communities. And is also consistent with HC15, which states the District Council will seek to maintain and improve the provision of local community facilities and services, land used by the community is included in that, supporting proposals which protect, retain, or enhance existing community facilities. And it goes on. If the land transfer takes place, Matlock Town Council will manage the site for the good of the whole of Stockholm's community, reflecting residents' documented preferences, its historic uses, and local plan policy. Matlock Town Council has an excellent land management history. It has managed Dean Fields above the football and cricket grounds in Matlock for many years, and has, with the help of groundworks, created wildflower meadows, a pond which is a focus for children to learn about wildlife in such a habitat, and maintained woodland, which is gradually being improved environmentally. The council also manages the community orchard in Megdale. The allotments being considered here are next to Stockholm's village green. They are another essential community asset. Their loss would also be in conflict with local plan policy HC15. Matlock Town Council is working with Stockholm's allotments and Derbyshire Dales for their survival, having sought but failed to find another site that could be used within the vicinity. Indeed, the two sites create a wonderful asset for Stockholms that would be difficult to replicate if lost. In conclusion, every community needs open spaces for community events and informal get-togethers, places where people go knowing that there will be friends and acquaintances there who they can share some time with. The village green behind the village hall is Stockholm's community open space, Stockholm's village green. It is the heart of the Stockholm's community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you. Moving on, item number 4 is of interest. Anybody? Councillor got any interest? Paul? Sorry? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I should have put the mic on. I'm a councillor at Matlock Town Council.
You are.
Sorry for not putting the mic on.
Same here, Chair.
Right,
I'm a member of Matlock Town Council.
You are.
Non-pecuniary interest.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So you want to leave the room when they have the debate? Thank you very much. Any more interest? No? Okay. Right, moving on to item number 5, and that is Stockholm's allotment. I think this is yours, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually a relatively simple report, but it relates to a very emotive issue, as you've already heard from the speakers before. It's really a progress report to let members know of the work that's been ongoing with Matlock Town Council in relation to what I should clarify is potentially both either compulsory purchase or compulsory hire. So if you could read the references to compulsory hire as being one or other of those two things, please. That ongoing work, the work that the District Council is also doing to defend the appeal against the asset of community value listing, which I think members are all aware of. Those items are really for noting at this stage and are subject to further and ongoing discussions with Matlock Town Council, with meetings planned with them in the not too distant future. The real purpose of the report is to approve the supplementary revenue budget estimate of £15,000. This is a joint report between myself and James, and that budget actually goes towards the legal costs associated with that defence. And also there's a recommendation in here, as we've heard from Councillor Hughes, to unpause or recommence, I suppose is a more correct way of saying it, but we decided to pause the community asset transfer of the land behind Stockholm's Village Hall to Matlock Town Council when this was last considered by the committee. This is a recommendation taking into account the results of the updated resident survey to recommence that work and put that back onto the standard workload of the legal team. Those are the two substantive recommendations before you. I'm happy to take any questions about them, but there really isn't a lot more in the report at this stage than that.
Questions for Tim, members? Any questions? No questions? Oh, Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Tim. Is it right that if we did allow the allotments to be purchased elsewhere or to be sold off, that we would probably have to find some new places to put allotments?
There is an ambition in the local plan to increase the provision of allotments. We put out a call for sites for allotment sites which didn't produce anything, and I know that Councillor Hughes and colleagues at the Town Council were actively trying to seek sites where allotments could be developed. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't anywhere coming forward at the moment, Councillor Battle, which is a great shame. Whether we have to create more allotments is another point. We're not the allotment authority, that is Matlock Town Council.
Councillor Murphy, you wish to speak?
Sorry, could I follow up that?
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, Tom. So if I'm just trying to see whether or not it fits in with the levelling up agenda, whether or not what we should be doing is creating more allotments. We should be building community, we should be building pride in place, we should be building all these things anyway. So it strikes me as being a bit of a pity to allow them to lapse. But there we go. Is this an agenda we should be following?
Well, as we established at the last meeting, after a great deal of research and debate and everything else, the District Council doesn't have a legal duty to provide allotments. That duty, such as it is, rests with town and parish councils in our area. That just is a question of law. It's nothing else. However, we clearly have a role to play to try and promote the development of allotments, and that's included in the local plan. And there are suggestions of the amount of provision that should be provided across the district, which I think, if we're honest, we would all know is currently under-provided for. So we'd certainly have a moral responsibility, Councillor Buttle, if not a legal one.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Stockholm allotments, asset of community value. Did we, as members, actually get to vote on that?
The simple answer is no. That's a function which the District Council delegates to me personally, or my post personally, and I determine whether a nominated asset meets the test and is suitable to be legally listed as an asset of community value. That function was undertaken. There was a first stage appeal, which is a request for an internal review. That decision was reviewed by our then Legal Services Manager, Lee Gardner, and he agreed with me that it did meet the test and should be listed as an asset of community value. It's an operational function rather than a policy one.
Councillor Archer.
Just a quick question following up from what one of the speakers said. They raised a few concerns about the timeline and the fact that deadlines are fast approaching, and talked about the need to make sure we got officer time prioritised on this and we do some intense activity. So can you just give us some indication of where we are with that, and how confident we are that, presuming this is all voted through tonight, that the timeline, the deadline is not going to become an issue for us. We're not going to run out of time, even if we are willing to do what they're asking us to do, that we're not going to run out of time to do it.
Thank you, Chair. I want to be careful of my answer because this obviously involves legal proceedings, and it would be sensible to keep this reasonably hypothetical. In terms of the asset to community value, the officer time required is mine. I'm the witness. I provided all my statements, and we have a date for that hearing, which is the middle of September. That's in my diary, and I'll be attending that. I believe that's being held virtually, which is frankly a bit of a relief, a bit easier to do. In terms of the compulsory purchase or compulsory hire, that isn't something which involves me. The way that has worked is that Matlock Town Council are the organisation that have to decide whether they want to take that action forward, and they have made that decision. As I understand it, and as I say, this is a legal issue, not one that I deal with myself. As I understand it, they have to approach the District Council to ask them to take that action on their behalf. That conversation took place, and external solicitors have been appointed to that case. Where we are with that case needs to be caught up with, which is one of the reasons why we're meeting with councillors from Matlock Town Council and the Allotment Association next week.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'll move into debate. Oh, Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The question being is the 15,000 budget that we're looking into, is this all to do with the community assets of the village green, which Matlock Town Council are trying to do, and where does the allotments fit into this part of the money?
Thank you, Chair. I understand where this question is coming from because there's all kinds of different things going on here, so a lot of which involve the word community. No is the answer to your question, Councillor Ball. It's actually about defending the asset of community value appeal, which is a direct function of this council. That's one of our responsibilities to deal with. The community asset transfer of that land is a separate function, but it also has the words community and asset in the title of it. It is basically that's a disposal of land to another organisation. We would normally sell it for a pound or whatever it might be. The asset to community value is a function whereby we decide whether something meets certain legal tests. We put it on a list, and that offers that land some protection in law, from some forms of development. It doesn't stop development, but it offers some protections. It also offers community groups the option to buy that site, or the option to make a bid for that site, should that site be put up for sale. They are different things.
Councillor Purdy. We'll move into debate if there are no more questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Before I move the recommendations, and I'll explain 2 points that I want to raise as well. I think this got off to a bad start in September, quite frankly, because I offered to go and seek out Mr Newton. I found out when I met Mr Newton that Councillor Hughes in particular had conversations, and it'd been correspondence between Matlock Town Council and his agent, and a telephone conversation between Councillor Hughes and his agent. So I'm sorry to say, David, but I wish you would have raised that at that meeting, because what happened was that I was then accused, a complaint was levied against me, that I was sort of in the back pocket of Mr Newton. Far from the case. I haven't seen Mr Newton for 10 years. No, sorry, David. So I haven't seen Mr Newton for 10 years. And I've kept a professional angle on this from both sides. So what I'm going to recommend, Chair, is the 4 points, but I want to make a comment on item 3, and I'm going to add item 5 as recommendation. And that is that there ought to be a caveat or a health check, and I recommend that if there's any more monies needing to be spent on over and above the £15,000, that this is brought back to members for consideration, because I'm aware Mr Newton will fight this, and I think probably to the bitter end. I want to add 5 recommendation that this authority subscribes to the allotment holders a sum of £5,000 towards their fundraising efforts. So I hope that meets with somebody approving it as a seconder, Chair.
Second.
Yeah, Chair, I'm quite happy to second what Councillor Purdy's put on the table.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments from me. Obviously, I welcome the comments from Councillor Purdy, and I think I'll start with Councillor Purdy. You've been a very useful sounding board, and I have appreciated talking some of the issues through with you, giving me an alternative perspective, and I think you're trying to work hard to bring this to a positive conclusion, and I think that is appreciated. So I think it's just want to put that on record, just to put that forward. I think also I just wanted to say, the public participation, how powerful the public participation has been this evening, and I think as a district council, with the technology and the video and everything, best in class in terms of allowing the Stockholm's allotment team to come forward and present that. So well done to everybody involved in that. I'm keen to hear from other members as well, of course, just to get views alongside Councillor Purdy's and others that have already spoken. We do need to protect the allotments on their current site. They're a wonderful community asset. If necessary, undertake a compulsory purchase. We need to protect the village green, recommendation 4. It's also a wonderful community asset. As ward councillors, we're already working with the community to apply for village green status, to underline that point. As a district council, we need to do all we can to support the community to protect these community assets. They contribute to our green and wellbeing agenda, biodiversity, mental health of residents, and cost of living, of course, which is becoming much more of an issue. The other thing is, I know there's been some discussion about the MP, Sarah Dines. I suppose my appeal to the MP, to our MP, Sarah Dines, would be to jump on board and support the community in protecting the allotments and the village green. For me, it seems like a very clear thing that she would want to support. So hopefully that will come to fruition. And then one final point from me, and this is a call out to all the councillors, all my colleagues. Imagine if a property developer was evicting allotment holders who had had an allotment in your ward for 100 years and was suggesting relocating the allotments onto land that they didn't own, which was actually the village green. I think that you'd probably all find that quite outrageous, an outrageous proposal. So I'm pleased that we seem to be converging on what I think is a good way forward, and I do thank the officers involved, and I also thank thank Councillor Purdy as well for moving his report and for the contribution. So thank you very much.
That's what. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I could be rather condemning tonight, but we are where we are. And this way forward is a way forward that I hope that all members will support, including the extra £5,000 for the fundraising efforts. I have my own feelings about that, whether that's a gesture or whether that's heartfelt, I don't know. But you heard tonight some very well presented points put by residents of Stockholm, and the one thing that upset me in the past, because I don't think we'd been in this position if we hadn't have altered item 4 on the community asset transfer, the land behind the Stockholm Village Hall. That's been going on for years. If that hadn't have laboured its way through the legal process, we wouldn't have been in this situation at the moment. And the way that it was treated in the early instances, there was so much bad blood and mudslinging towards Matlock Town Council was unjustified. And I have to say that I was disappointed to hear Councillor Purdy name again a member of the Matlock Town Council, and David Hughes, as stepping in, because he was acting under Matlock Town Council's jurisdiction because of all the bad blood that was there. We wanted to make sure that Matlock Town Council was doing everything it could to support local people, and that is his role on the environment role. I think you've heard, and I think it was Mrs. Marriott that talked about the anger in Stockholm. Well, that is no mean claim, because it is very sincere to me that the people of Stockholm find this whole situation appalling, because we have the 2 pieces of land. We have it is a valuable asset, as we've all heard. The delays have caused even more anger, and Matlock Town Council are actually working to try and resolve all the issues and taking this forward. There is a legacy there, and I've been supporting events in Stockholm since 1985, since I first got onto this council. And the people of Stockholm have always made councillors and other people in the community very welcome indeed. And I find it, I think David also said, this is a community that's got an identity of its own. It is unique, and Stockholm people are very proud of their area. And some of the information that's gone out is a little disingenuous. And as I said, we're now into a stage where we can move forward, and we can move forward on behalf of local people. And I hope people will recognise that, so that we can move forward. And we move forward as a team, not as separate unities, because we have to work along with our communities, with our local government, and let's hope that we get a favourable outcome.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, tonight has been made more of a clearer issue of what has been the problem, and not naming names of who's gone where and done what. The reality of what was made clear to me tonight from the speakers is the fact that the particular landowner is saying, oh well, I don't want you on that patch, you can go to the village green, which isn't his in the first place, which again is utterly wrong, and I don't see why you should have to start up again. So I think that's, in my opinion, from before, that was the confusion that I got of the two issues that were going on. There are two issues here. It's not all just Stockholm's allotments. It is the village green to do with the hall as well. So when it first came and it was all, we're not moving, we don't want to move off the allotments, it wasn't clear to me until it's been made more clear tonight of how it's been tried to be moving them from one area to another, which isn't anything to do with the particular person who's trying to do this. I don't agree with the fact of having to start up again. I certainly will want to be able to support the open Greenland and areas of community for Stockholm itself, and I am prepared to stand and support the allotment people as well, because as it's shown, they are there. It is a community thing, and it is there. It's been there for as long as it's been there. And to have to uproot and move for the benefit of somebody to try to achieve more financial benefit on land that might never ever come to fruition, I think is wrong at the end of the day. So I will give this my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I thank Tim for the answer to my question. This is a very sensitive issue in this area. I know you have the right to do what you did, but I would really have appreciated if you'd actually spoken and advised the members. You don't have to, but you know, we're now in a situation where, you know, you're looking for us to give you some funding towards the financial and legal fight and whatever. Personally, I don't think we should be venturing into that, because what's going to happen, we're going to have other people looking in and they're going to see what's happening here, and we could end up with other parishes, towns, whatever, asking us to do the same thing. We have issues with legal resources ourselves, because obviously, you know, we've lost people and whatever. You know, have we got the time to be able to, you know, to be dealing with an issue like this? I'm just disappointed, really, that, you know, that we're here and it's going to happen, and we've got nothing. I can't, you know, couldn't share an opinion with you and vote against what we've done. But you've done what you're allowed to do.
Councillor Murphy, you'd like to comment, Tim?
Just to comment, the ward members are consulted on all applications for assets of community value. Yeah. No, in the same way that the department I run deals with food premises inspections, we prosecute them. Planning inspections, we prosecute them. It is what we do, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to come in first off because of the conversation that Tim seems to be having with Dermot. I think the Localism Act requires Tim to make to request a community asset value statement if the correct people, an appropriate community group, request one. I don't think he's got a choice. I think it is something he has to do under the Localism Act. So I think you're being a little bit unfair. But I'll move on. I actually, when I first came across this, and when Stockholm's looked at risk, the first thing I did was I checked that Tideswell's allotments were, who owned them? I wanted to know. And it turns out that we owned them, and that really cheered me up. I just knew, you know, we were safe. So that was a bit of great news that I was really worried, and it came forward, so that was really good. Now, this evening, I just want to say how fantastic allotments are. There's biodiversity, there's community, there's family. You know, everyone's mental health is improved. Their nutrition is improved. It really is something that we should be looking for across the district, wherever we can. You know, if we can create more of these, then, you know, we're going to end up with happier people, which I think is possibly what we should be here for. I think that might be about it. I don't think I've really got much more to say apart from how fantastic I am, how fantastic it is. We're going to support Matlock Town Council in its fight to retain its allotments. So thank you very much, and thank you very much everybody for this.
Thank you, Neil, for your contribution. That's been wonderful. Councillor Raw.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to thank Tim for an excellent piece of work and coming to the sensible and correct conclusion and a way forward. So thank you very much for that. And that's what we have officers for, to understand, comprehend and make sense of the law. I welcome Gary's contribution of £5,000. I'm curious as to why he came up with that figure, and just in the spirit of levelling up that's currently on the agenda, I wondered if Eam, Hathersage and Grindleford allotments could be awarded a similar amount of money. Thank you.
Would you come back?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not against allotments. I think they're fantastic. It's nothing to do with that. It's just this process I don't like, you know. And obviously Tim's within his right to do what he wants to do. But going back to the money, the guys in Matlock Town Council knew they were going to go down this process. So why didn't you amend your precept and raise some money yourselves?
He needs to get his history right. Exactly what we've done. Why do you need 15,000? Sorry, I'm not going to get into a debate.
Councillor Murphy, we'll leave the debate there. I think we will. Any more speakers? Right, and we'll straight to the vote then. All those in favour? Against? One against? Abstentions? One abstention. That's been carried. Thank you very much. Item number 6 on the agenda tonight is the car park review.
Thank you, Chair. Those of you may be aware that the last time the car parking policy was reviewed was in 2012-13, which was some time ago now. So the proposals in the report are to look at certain areas within car parking, including the level of charges, concessions, provision of different types of parking and the regulated and unregulated car parks, along with 5 elected members, and come up with some options to be introduced by autumn 23. I think it's quite self-explanatory. There is one change just would like to make in recommendation 2, which is a change from any options to be considered by the Community Environment Committee to actually the relevant decision-making body, because depending what the options are will depend where that decision or recommendation will go. So it was just to add that in, but I'm just open for questions.
Question for Vicky.
Yeah, just a quick one, hopefully. Just doing a little bit of research on this item before tonight and reading the document that Ashbourne Town team produced about car parking charges. Can you just clarify for me where legally the situation is in terms of what funds raised from car parking charges are allowed to be used for, whether they have to be used in a directed way towards traffic and that sort of thing, or whether they can be used by council more generally as a fund for other things?
My understanding is that any on-street income that's generated, that could be from parking tickets or P&D or permits, has to be ring-fenced to a special parking account. Any surplus in that account needs to be spent on transportation projects or things relating to transportation, but any off-street parking income is classed as a business, so therefore it isn't ring-fenced in the same way.
So the car parks can be spent on other things, but things from on the street have to be to do with road.
That's my understanding of it. I mean, I'm happy to seek legal advice for confirmation of it, but that's...
Okay, thanks a lot.
It's okay, it's covered it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? No questions. Move into debate then.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, to answer Councillor Rowe's question why that sum, it was to match the funds that Matlock Town Council put in. It matches it equally.
Thank you.
So, yes, I've asked for this, and it's because I was asked by the ward members of Ashbourne to examine the complaints coming from some traders in Ashbourne that through the loss of high street shops, it was as a result of our car parking charges. So I organised a meeting, and I think about 80 traders attended this meeting. I couldn't convince them that it wasn't the car parking charges that was the problem. And in going to that meeting, Councillor Dr. Steve Cates very kindly gave me a file, a 2014 economic assessment on Ashbourne, which unfortunately nobody in Ashbourne had picked up on any of the recommendations. So I sort of put that down on the table and challenged them, and I have to thank Anne Wright, and I have done ever since, for coming forward. As a result, the Matlock Town team the Ashbourne Town team was set up, and here we are now on the cusp of putting a bid in for Ashbourne, and hope, to goodness sake, they're going to be very lucky in getting the LEF funds. But I did promise, being squeezed in a corner with all those 80 traders, that I would look into it. The pandemic's held it up. As Vicky said, it's some time since a car park review was undertaken, but I've asked if it can be looked at from a wider angle, and I'm pleased that's been undertaken. I've got a simple view. I don't think we can maximise income from car parking. I'd like to see a multi-storey car parking, station car park in Matlock Bath, for example. And so those kind of issues, I think, can be looked at. And it gives us scope as well to look at the two aspects of the yearly report, whether we continue with the Christmas campaign, and indeed the illumination. So happy to move the recommendations, and I fully agree, as the last car park review proved, a weighty tome of work and officers' involvement. It's necessary that it takes time over that period to come to fruition. Thank you, Chair.
Is that found a seconder? Councillor Bull, want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I'm happy to support this. 12, we're looking at, 10 years on. So I think it is time to start having a look at the review. But I just hope within this that we try to facilitate and not one price fits all for every area within our district, and maybe look at it to be more digitally orientated, so that there's a chance that we don't have a set for an hour, because people, once they've paid that hour, if they go off and they're enjoying themselves, then they're rushing back, and then because they need to get there. But there are people that just pop to different areas, and there are lots of different car parks around our district where they just conveniently drop off for about 5-10 minutes to do little jobs and go again, and then but they get peeved to the fact of having to pay £1.50 or £2 for the price of stopping there just for that short period of time. And I think we would benefit more revenue in the long run if we could do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I shall support this tonight, and I agree with comments that Councillor Bull has just made, in that one size does not fit all. We need to look at that very closely. To me, the report is totally financial, what we can make out of financial gain. I hope that the review will go further than that and really take on board the opportunities and the voice of local people. There are opportunities out there to develop our car parks and increase income, but in places where that is possible. Not every places we've indicated. There are lots of different issues in the car parks, and some want to be security minded as well. So it does have an effect on expenditure on what we want to do in the future. However, I do have a little issue when Councillor Purdy says that he brought this up because the people of Ashbourne, the traders in Ashbourne, were concerned. If you remember, not about 2 or 3 years ago, the 5 largest towns got together and debated the car parking issue, and that was instigated by Worcester Town Council. and Bakewell, Darley-Dale, Matlock Bath, Matlock, and Ashbourne and Wirksworth all met, and we discussed the issues, and we decided on a plan of action. When it got to their local councils, it fell apart because of the political divide. And there was only Matlock Town Council, I believe, and possibly Wirksworth, I didn't see theirs, actually made representation, and it was just thrown away. It wasn't even considered. So there are real problems out there, and our towns are suffering. At the moment, Matlock is doing well, better than most, because we've got some local independent businesses coming in, and we are lucky. But looking around Ashbourne, yes, it does need a lot of money, and I hope that Ashbourne will be treated like Matlock's been treated in a regeneration scheme. And I would certainly support that, because it is all part of Derbyshire Dales. But for God's sake, if you're going out talking to local parish councils, you must talk to people over and above politics, and you must get down into listen to the traders, because without those traders the town will fall apart. And I go out regularly, Councillor Cruz goes out regularly talking to local business in town, because that is our job, to create an environment where we can be proud of and we can attract business. Car parking is a big part of that. So let's get down to brass tacks and look at it sensibly. And the thing that I always talk about is the scoping exercise, and that has to be right. It's pretty vague at the moment, and my worry is that officers will say, well, that's not within the remit. Well, I want it to be a fully open remit where we can actually talk about the problems, come with an answer, bring people back into the Dales, because a lot, because of car parking charges, just aren't coming. They're going to other places. We've got a problem at Cromford at the moment, up at the cemetery, because people are parking on the street there and blocking the cemetery, the people that are visiting the cemetery, because they're not going into the county council car park because they've got to pay. We want to bring them back into where business is. We want to bring them back to enjoy, and so they can still go out and they can still have a coffee without paying extortionate costs. So please, let's do it right.
Thank you, close with Councillor Wakeman.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is going to be a bigger job than we thought it was going to be. Every aspect of it has got to be looked into, and I think Vicky's took on a very big task. And I'm hoping that the groups that we're going to have, that we're all going to be involved, and not just a few. As long as we're all involved in the workshops, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Roll.
Yeah, I was just following up on what Sue was saying about, you know, looking at everybody's different needs. I think, and sometimes people only needing to park for a short period of time. I'm well aware that carers often only need to park for a short period of time, and it'd be good if we could give them 20 minutes free parking so that they can pop in and pick up a prescription or just do something quick. So if that could be considered as part of the review, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Councillor Purdy.
Just to answer Councillor Flitter, I expect you to have a go at me, but it wasn't just because of Ashbourne. That was the focal point indeed. But I was aware of that conversation you just spoke about between the towns, and it did fall apart, which is why I did feel strongly that after 10 years, 11, 12 years, it's time we had a review. And I agree it needs to be scoped properly.
Councillor Cruz.
I'm going to support the report. I suppose it's just to make a couple of broader points which aren't to do with parking, because I think we will have a good look at that, and I welcome it. It's the alternative means of transport, cycling, a lot more e-bikes, places to park, and also the recent Trans-Peak issue that we've seen, and I think it's good that that's been dealt with for the medium term at least, or the nearish term. But yeah, at least people are trying to protect that. So there's alternative means of transport as well. I think as a council we need to be an advocate advocate for that, even though it's outside the scope of this report. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers, I'll go straight to the vote. It's been proposed and second. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That's
Thank you, Chair. This report provides information about the external audit plan for the 2021-22 accounts. While the statutory deadlines have been extended for officers to prepare the statement of accounts and for Mazars to audit them, the deadlines will be challenging to achieve. The report explains there's been an increase in audit fees of £6,002 above our current budget. This increase was reported to members back in March, and it relates to additional audit work that's required by the National Audit Office as a result of new parts of the accounts that require more audit work than before, and also a change in the approach to the a value for money assessment. In the financial year 21-22, the Council received a government grant to offset those increased audit fees. If we were to receive a similar grant in 2022-23, we wouldn't actually need to use the general reserve to finance the increase. But at the present time, we don't know if we're going to receive that grant. So I'm recommending that we need to use the general reserve. John Presley and James Sutton from Mazars are here to my right, and they'll answer any questions, I hope, on their report, which is shown at Appendix 1. Thank you.
A question, members. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, just one question. Found an unusual statement in here, in that the external auditor has requested that the memorandum be brought to members' attention. Can't ever remember that being in the report before. Is there any particular reason that the auditors have asked for that to come here?
I'm fairly sure that I copied last year's report and that it probably was in there, and it is something that is just a formal way of saying that, you know, rather than me emailing it to you or whatever, it be brought to a formal committee.
We would ask for the report to be brought to your attention each year. It's by no means unusual for that to be the case. It is the norm for it to be brought to the committee's attention.
Just the wording.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, and thank you for the excellent report again. I mean, we always come out fairly well in it, but my question is, what account do you take of the constraints on officer capacity? You might know we're having awful difficulty employing new auditors, and that's not just as a unique authority, but I think it's getting a problem throughout the country. So there's huge strain on local authorities per se. We're unable to keep staff because they're going to the private sector, and I have a great concern that this might implode in local authorities in the future. I just wonder how that perspective comes into your work.
I share some of your concerns in that regard. It is a pattern that we're finding across many local government organisations. The only thing that we're able to do really is to flex the timing of our work so that it doesn't come along at the worst possible time for officers. We don't have very much flexibility outside of that, because we're expected at the end of the day to deliver the audit by the end of November. What we can do, and what we have done, is we've delayed our work this year until hopefully it has been possible to resolve some of those issues. That's the only thing that we can do in terms of a work round with Karen and the team, and therefore that is what we're doing.
Any more questions?
Can I just come back, Chair, yeah, if you don't mind, because I just missed another one actually. Again, it's in the wording of this print is so small I've got a job to see it. But it indicates that it is the auditors that decide what what action should be issued within the internal report. Are those issues that you look at day-to-day running of the council, or are they sort of different from advice given by government or financial? Who decides what areas you look at, and what are the reasons behind that?
John, would you like to answer that?
Certainly. In terms of the value for money work that we do and what we look at, we've outlined in the report some of the areas that we take a look at in terms of value for money. And what we look at there is sort of your sort of processes for financial sustainability, your processes for ensuring good governance, and what you do to ensure you achieve economy, efficiency and effectiveness in terms of use of public money. So at the end of the day, we take a look at a lot of your internal processes. We look at the, if you like, operational side of all of that. We only sort of comment in passing on things around government policy. We don't get into those sort of areas. What we ask Karen to take a look at each year is a self-assessment checklist, which is around those areas of financial sustainability, good governance, and what is done to achieve good economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Wider aspects of policy are left with the politicians. As auditors, we try and keep out of that domain, although we will comment upon, if you like, the uncertainties around policy and how that may affect resourcing for the council, and what that then means in terms of any sort of hiatus around financial planning or any of the difficulties it might create for you. We would certainly comment upon that in passing, where it actually impinges upon the financial sustainability agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was the wording again, issues that we consider within the report.
Any more questions? Therefore, I'll move to debate. Councillor Purdy? All those in favour? That's unanimous. That's been carried. Thank you very much. Item number 8. This is the internal audit report for 21-22. Jenny, it's you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report's a summary of the work that we've undertaken in the 21-22 financial year, and it's also to provide an annual audit opinion on the Council's overall governance, risk and control arrangements. So it does comply with the public sector audit standards in terms of the content of the report. So you can see that this year we've issued 11 reports, which is a few more than last year. It's still only 38% of the original plan. You did approve a revised plan, and we achieved 94% of that. Basically, we haven't achieved the whole plan because the new auditor only sort of started partway through the year, and also the senior auditor has again spent a lot of time on business grants and reconciliations and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, in June, both the senior auditor and the auditor have handed in their resignation. The senior auditor post has been advertised, and that is with a market supplement to try and attract the right calibre of applicant. It is a sort of national and sector problem, the recruitment of auditors, and Derbyshire aren't alone in that. Details of the reports issued, you can see those at Appendix 1. With the exception of the waste collection contract, all of the reports were either substantial or reasonable opinion, which are positive results. We haven't identified any fraud. The amount of work completed, along with other assurances obtained, such as public sector network compliance, external audit work, the work of the risk management group, and the review of the compliance with the code of corporate governance that Karen's undertaken, allow me to provide an unlimited audit opinion. We have only just done enough work for me to be able to provide that, but I can do that this year. Paragraphs 2.8 to 2.15 detail the overall conclusion on the adequacy of the Council's governance, risk and control arrangements. In my opinion, we can give reasonable assurance with a few exceptions that are detailed at paragraphs 2.15. The internal control issues arising from audits completed in the year have been considered during the preparation of the annual governance statement and are reflected in there where needs be. Appendix 2, that provides you a comparison of the planned work against the work that we did complete, and the audits that we haven't completed have been rolled forward to the 22-23 financial year audit plan. So moving on to our quality and insurance improvement programme. In previous years that's been included in the body of the report, but this year they're set out in Appendix 3, and that was one of the recommendations of our external reviewer. Thought it should be set out in a separate document. So that document helps to demonstrate how we meet the public sector internal audit standards and the code of ethics. So paragraph 2.18, as required by the public sector audit standards, I've confirmed internal audit's independence and that we have a direct reporting line to the corporate leadership team and to this committee. So the recommendation is that the Internal Audit Consortium Annual Report for 21-22 is accepted. Thank you.
Question for Jenny? Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thanks again, Jenny. I mean, I asked Chief Exec at the last meeting why we're not retaining these staff, and it's the old story. You know, we're not able to pay enough. So this is a government issue. I think, you know, the government's got to recognise, and I hope some pressure's been put on the LGA on this throughout the country, because it's getting critical. We've often highlighted over this past 2 or 3 years the shortage of staff at this authority and the critical situations that they're in, and so it's huge thanks again to those still standing that are carrying out this work. But the question basically is, are there any real concerns in respect of compliance with financial regulations and procedures? How serious is it? Is it of real concern, or it can wait?
Jenny?
I mean, for this year I've been able to give an opinion because we can still rely to an extent on work we've done in previous years, but obviously as you move further away and we look at less areas, we can place less reliance on that because it's getting older work. Again, because both of your auditors are leaving, it does create quite a serious issue, because we're not going to be doing any audits in the next couple of months, so we're going to get further behind on the timetable. So we've already rolled a number of audits forward from previous years, and again have been rolled forward to 22-23, so we're actually getting sort of further behind with our programme. So it is something that, you know, we do need to action as soon as we can, but recruitment is a real issue. We've got a vacancy that we've not been able to fill in the consortium. The Chartered Institute Public Finance and Accountancy are really aware of this, and they're trying to raise the profile of internal audit as a career and looking what they can do to you know, make it a more attractive career option to school leavers, like right from the ground up. But we're competing against you know, firms that can offer complete remote working, which means they can come from further afield, and it's difficult.
Can I come back, Chair? So how far down the road do you think it might be a question for 3 of you, Paul, Karen and Jenny? How far down the road then do you think, if we're not going to recruit, where does it become really critical, and do we then have to go out for...
Yeah, I mean, we've got an advert out at the moment. We've got one out for the senior auditor, and we've also got an advert out for a senior accountant, and the accountancy post has essentially been vacant since March. Since November. We've had interim agency accountants in place for that, and that's an option we could explore for the audit post, to try and get an agency auditor in. So if this round of advertising isn't successful, that's one option I'll be looking at. We can also consider whether we can partner with another local authority. Jenny's already explained that the consortium, which perhaps would be our favoured approach, they're having difficulties themselves. I know Jenny's mentioned that other authorities buy in the audit function from, you know, the likes of PwC, KPMG, probably Mazars do it. So that's another option we can look at. So we will be looking at that if this round isn't successful.
Jim, do you have a comment on that?
Chair, yeah, just to respond to Councillor Purdy's remark about compliance with financial regulations and contract standing orders. I think it's probably fair to say that in the last few years, certainly I'm a new officer who's come in, I've not had any training on how these things work at the authority because of the remote working we've been doing. So there's a number of officers who come into senior management positions who've not had that training. And I think from the work that we've done, we've seen that we haven't got an appropriate level of understanding at that level. So training is, you know, planned to take place in the next couple of months. We're also bringing forward to Council in September proposed revisions to contract standing orders and financial regulations to make sure that they're consistent with the current provisions in terms of UK law, having exited the EU. And that will be another opportunity to reinforce what those rules are. So I think we're aware as a corporate management team that there are issues and we're seeking to address those in the coming months.
Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, through you, Chair. Why have these staff left? Have they got a job with better pay, or is it the work conditions, or is it our pay is not good? Is there a reason why they've gone?
Essentially, the senior auditor has left for better pay, much better pay, with the Sheffield mayoral combined authority. And also she has cited working conditions. She's spent a lot of time, as members know, over the last 2 years dealing with COVID business grants and not, as she would say, doing proper audit duties. And I think that's just worn her down. With hindsight, if we'd known that that was going to go on for as long as it did, we would have perhaps brought in agency staff to do that. And we did try that right at the beginning. We did have an agency accountant, but it didn't work terribly well because they didn't have the knowledge of the district or our functions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
I just wondered if there's a possibility of perhaps, you know, if this is going to be a long-term issue, looking to see whether we could sponsor a graduate in their last year of university and you know, on the basis that if we gave them a bursary that they would come and work for us for X amount of years to attract.
Yeah, I'd be happy to investigate that. The post that we amended last year for the auditor, that was set out as a sort of trainee post to help that person complete their accounting technician training and then move on. But unfortunately, after just over 6 months, that person's resigned.
Thank you. If no more questions, move to debate. Somebody like to move it?
Well, I'll move it, Chair, because
Thank you.
I think I take on Councillor Purdy's points. I think we're very lucky with the staff that we've got remaining with us and the work that they've done over the years. And it's credit to them that we're in a position that we are at the moment. I do have, I found it difficult to align myself with this report in some ways because it talks about comparing work, which was planned, and it talked about summarising performance. Well, I could see the comparing of number of days, but I couldn't see within the report how we actually summarise performance and rate it. And that caused me to troll through the website quite extensively. And I still can't find a 4-year audit strategy. And I don't know whether we've got one or where it is, but I would certainly like to understand where we are. We've got lots of tables where we've got items listed and number of planned days, but we've got no real meaningful discussion on rating those risks, if you like. And I looked through the figures of last, I think it was March and November when we looked at this in committee, and all it was the numbers had transposed, and we decided to take on the higher figure. So it was the strategy of how we set out these planned days, and surely every business and any organisation if they're having audits, they must plan them for 4 years, not year by year. So I would be interested to know where I can find that on the website, because it is difficult, and it's getting more difficult to troll the website, I must say, over the past few months. But I really wanted to look at the performance indicators on this and where we were, and that I couldn't find. And also, again, the wording, if you'll forgive me, but to put in a report that, albeit the minimum work was done, really should not be in the report, because we all understand the pressures that we've had, but somebody in the public reading this will think, well, they're not doing much there. And there is an instance later on in this agenda where I could relate that to. So it did disappoint me a little bit there, and I think we ought to be careful of the words that we use. But I'm quite happy to move this. I understand the work that's been undertaken, and I'm happy to move it.
Can I just get a second for that, Councillor Waitman?
I'll second it, Chair.
Karen, would you like to make comment or any update? Or sorry, Jenny.
Yeah, in terms of the work that we decide to do, when you get the audit plan to approve, you see a sort of 3-year plan. So we do have a 3-year plan, and I also have a spreadsheet that tries to predict sort of going forward 5 years, and that's based on risk and how important we think the areas are. So areas that we think are high risk, we'll look at more often. Areas that are low risk, less often. So when we've had these number of days, we have tried to focus them where it is important. But again, a caveat on that is we did have a new member of staff, so we had to give them audits to train them up, that they were capable of doing as well. They couldn't sort of dive straight into the more complex audits. So we do have risk very much in mind. In terms of performance indicators, because it's been such a strange year and so much time has been spent on business grants, we haven't measured to the same extent sort of achieving audits in time. And it's actually really difficult to come up with meaningful performance indicators for internal audit. I mean, I've been to the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy where we've discussed them, and it's quite hard, because you can have things like, you know, number of recommendations made and accepted, but you know, you could make 4 recommendations where you only need 1, and that bumps up your, you know, figures. So it's difficult to get ones that are actually meaningful, but it is something I sort of will work on and try and develop.
Thank you, Jeff.
Just for a second, because the tables that I look at are 1920, 2021 and 21-22. I don't see tables going forward. And that's what I'm really looking for, a plan for the life of a council, you know, not year by year and then looking back. That's only half the story for me. So if we could take that on board and let me know where I can find this information, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, certainly when I bring next year's plan, we can give you that information going forward 2 years rather than back, or the 5 years, 2 years previous, current year and going forward, if that's what you'd like to see.
Thank you, Jenny, for that. Councillor Bottle.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've got a recommendation here, which is the internal audit annual report be accepted. Obviously, we are going to accept that, but I'm wondering if we should have had another recommendation, which is a plan to how we're going to actually get it better next year and have a little bit less red.
Karen, would you like to make a comment on that?
If Councillor Buttle would like to wait until later in the agenda when we look at the annual governance statement, he might see there's an action relating to that issue.
Apologies.
Very much. Moving on, item number 9, progress update of the 21-22 intern audit plan. So you, Karen? Oh, Jenny, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair, it's me again. Yeah, so it's short and sweet, this report. It's a very positive report. We've issued 6 reports in this period, 3 with substantial assurance and 3 with reasonable assurance, which are our top 2 categories, which we see as being positive and demonstrating sort of good controls in place. So I don't have any concerns to raise. We haven't identified any fraud, and the recommendation is the report be noted. Thank you.
Question? No? Go on then.
Not mine. And it's all about what happens if the recommendations aren't accepted by the officers. Because we've got one in benefits where there were 5 recommendations within the report, but only 4 accepted. So where do we go from there?
Jenny?
What happens is if it's a low priority recommendation and to an extent medium, then it is up to the managers to take the risk. If they might feel that they've got alternative controls in place. If it was a high priority recommendation, then we would most certainly be sort of taking it to, in the first instance, Director of Resources and 151 officer to express our concerns. And then high again if needs be. So if it was high, if it's a medium, again it would depend on the reasons. It may be resources. There'd have to be explanations for that. So if we felt we needed to, we'd take it to a higher level. But there is some discretion, I guess, for low priority recommendations that may be resource intensive for officers to refuse. In terms of the benefits one, I think that was in terms of 2-tier sort of computer access to the system, and we suggested that perhaps they might want to increase the password length of actual access to the academy system. But it was felt that already officers had to have initial access to the system with standard protocol access. So the next level of access, if you like, to that system, they felt didn't require the sort of extra password length, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as long as
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Jen. Just wondering about DR11 risk management, note 1, response not due at time of writing report. Is that in yet?
Yes, I have had a full response in respect of that audit now and the recommendations.
Would somebody like to move the report? Councillor Wakeman? Councillor Purdy? We're flying along. Item number 10, Annual Governance Statement 21-22.
Thank you,
Karen.
Chair. Thank you. So the report sets out for members the reasons why we prepare an annual governance statement, why it's important, and what the statement tells us. The annual governance statement for 21-22 is shown at Appendix 1 to the report in your pack. Part 3 of the annual governance statement shows the evidence that the corporate leadership team and I assessed while preparing the annual governance statement. We've used triangles to highlight areas that require improvement and a tick symbol to show successes. Part 7 of the annual governance statement shows a progress report relating to the issues identified in last year's statement, that's in section 7A. And it also shows that there are 6 significant governance issues that have been identified for 21-22 for action during 22-23. Those are shown on pages 104 and 105 of the agenda pack. 4 of the 6 governance issues on the action plan have been brought forward from last year's annual governance statement. These relate to, first of all, the Council's financial position and the budget gap that still has to be addressed. But we're awaiting the announcement of the government funding reviews to re-evaluate our situation before we move forward on that one. The second action relates to arrangements for the asset management system. This was identified in last year's AGS, but the actions still haven't been fully implemented because officers have been directed to other priorities during the pandemic and afterwards. A similar situation arises for the third one, data protection. Again, there were actions identified in an internal audit review that haven't yet been fully completed. The fourth action, which again comes forward from last year, relates to internal audit resources, which you've heard about in Jenny's report. At the time last year, the action was to fill the vacant post, which we did, but now we're in an even worse situation. And as I explained earlier, if the current recruitment process isn't sufficient, we'll explore other options. There are two new significant governance issues which have been identified as part of this year's evaluation. The first one of those is where weaknesses have been identified in arrangements for procurement and contract management. It was mentioned earlier in response to a member's question that it's been noted that there's been insufficient training given about contract standing orders and financial regulations. And as James explained earlier, we're going to review those and come to Council in September with updated contract standing orders and financial regulations, and then we'll roll out a series of workshops and training for officers. The other item relating to that action is to implement the recommendations from the independent review of waste management that members heard about earlier this year. And the final governance issue that we've identified is that arrangements for ensuring systems are in place to meet grant conditions need to be strengthened. This one came up fairly recently when we were signing off a final claim for a grant, and it involved part of a grant being administered by a third party rather than directly by the council. And there was no formal instruction in place to make sure that the conditions that the council was bound by, that the government put on us, there was no process to make sure that that was passed through to the third party to make sure that they complied on our behalf. So we'll be looking at strengthening those through financial regulations and improved procedures. So the next step is for the annual governance statement to be approved by this committee, and once approved it needs to be signed by the leader and chief executive. I have noticed that there's a target date missing on action number 4, the one relating to the internal auditor, and that should be 31st of December 2022. I'm hoping that well before then, but definitely by then, we'll have the audit team back up to strength. And then once approved, the annual governance statement will be included in the draft statement of accounts for 21-22, which is due to be published on the website by the 31st of July. If there are any changes in the period from now until the accounts are brought back by the auditors, the audited accounts come in November, then I'll report back to members in November with those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Members' questions, Gary?
Thanks, Karen. I wonder if you could include in that report my question, and that is the concern over the rise in inflation. Michael Gove at the LGA conference said we're going to get a 2-year deal. He's been sacked. They're all on a merry-go-round at the moment, so I don't know what's going to happen. But the future is bleak, to say the least. And so I just wonder how we're predicting the impact upon our finances, medium term and long term, of the rise in inflation, how significantly it will increase the budget cap, and what kind of report I think you need to back for the benefit of members to show where we're at in a sort of graph. Is that possible?
Thank you, Karen.
What we plan to do, once we've got the statement of accounts for 21-22 out of the way, we plan to start to review the medium-term financial plan. In the past, that's been a fairly simple process because inflation's been low and we've not had to take many factors into account, and And in the past, we've actually reported that to the July council meeting, along with the outturn. This year, it needs a more thorough examination. And I think we'll need to do some scenario testing. You know, what if inflation goes up by this? What if demand for a service goes up by that? So it's going to be a much more complex process. Given that staff will probably be on leave for most of August, I think we'll miss the September committee cycle. We won't have finished the piece by then, but I expect to come back in November with that piece of work.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a lot of rigour that's built into this governance statement, a lot of detail, and I appreciated reading it. The thing, maybe the opportunity for improvement might be around the people dimension of the organisation and the culture. Maybe not even for this time round. We're struggling to recruit. You know, the type of organisation. What does it feel like to work for Derbyshire Dales? Do we measure engagement? And governance is only as good as the people that are in the organisation. So I think that's something that I think could come out stronger, albeit it's a good, rigorous document, and something to think about as you evolve your thinking around governance. So just a little bit of feedback, but thank you very much for the report.
Would like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Cruz makes a very, very valid point, and there are a number of pieces of work which we've been engaged on recently, which are now coming to a conclusion. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be inviting members to attend a briefing session on a piece of work that we've had done by Alan Graham of Circling Squares, which was really on the back of the independent waste review. But one of the recommendations, as you will recall, was to look at strategic capacity, organisational capacity and the like. Alan brought his report to corporate leadership team on Tuesday of this week, and we will be bringing that forward to members in a briefing session in the next 2 weeks, I anticipate. So that work is already underway, but it's only one piece of a number of work streams that we currently have on the go.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I'll just ask one, because
only one.
Yeah, I don't want to be critical of this report, because I understand. I think there's bigger issues here that we've got to look at rather than nitpick over wording. Because I've read it through, and there's even wording here that, you know, the public would take a different view on, and especially on management override and things like this. Well, my question is based around our partnership with Chesterfield, with the finance, and how actually we make contact with them. It was difficult for me as a member to get some information this last week, only be told by the telephonist that the system is that I report something and then an email is sent and we would get an email back. And 2 days later, I still hadn't heard anything. And I'm wondering how members of the public with questions on finance or revenues actually get in touch and discuss something. Is there another system that, you know, within these rooms, or this council, that they can go through? Because that wasn't very satisfactory for me as a councillor.
Karen, would you like to comment?
Well, I can only apologise to Councillor Flitter that the experience you had wasn't very good. We have been looking at links mainly from the point of view of our customers and how they access the council tax and business rates recently, particularly for people that visit in person. And one of the things that James and I have been discussing is skilling up the receptionists so that the people on the front desk can answer the public's enquiries rather than directing them to telephone Chesterfield and talk to our colleagues there. But for a person, any resident telephoning with a council tax query, it's supposed to be seamless to them, you know, that they might know that they've phoned a Chesterfield telephone number, but the service they get back should be exactly the same as if they contacted an officer here. So if that wasn't your experience, perhaps you and I could have a further discussion and I can take that up. We do have monthly meetings with the managers of the service at Chesterfield, and so I've got one due in a fortnight, so I can take it up with them.
Thank you. Any more questions? I move straight to the debate then. Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations as set out in the report.
Find a seconder. Councillor Bowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't mind seconding it. As we all know, there's a lot of work gone into this, and you have really gone into it because of your highlighting issues, giving us a tick and putting your triangles in and the likes. My only comment is you're becoming spread further and further wider to the fact that, you know, when are we going to be able, because it's all right identifying all these, but to be able to have some resources there for you and your fellow officers within your department to come across and make this and put this right to what needs to be done. So I do feel that we really have got to concentrate on making sure that we've got the resources and get the staff to be helping you, because you're only one person that runs it at the moment with everything. It all has to come through you, and I think there's got to be a lot more that's done to help you. But I will second this report. Thank you.
I'm going straight to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. It's been carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This report was brought forward from the April meeting, so it does seem a little late now, because the purpose of it is to set the accounting policies that the finance team will use in closing the accounts, and you know they're well on the way through that work now. But I kept it on the agenda because it seemed like good practice. So I hope that the report, while it's technical in its nature, is self-explanatory. The proposed accounting policies are shown at Appendix 1. They're not very different from last year's statements of accounts where members approved those policies. Any changes are explained in paragraphs 2.4 and 2.5 of the report, and they mostly relate to the valuation of assets. There are no further updates to the report at this time, and I'm seeking your approval for the accounting policies. Thank you.
If no questions, I'll go straight to
Can I just ask, Chair, noting the difficulties that we're still experiencing with our financial staff, I'm wondering whether Councillor Purdy or the Chief Exec could put something together for a leaders meeting so we can discuss the problem in detail and look at the options that we can actually go forward with as a united front.
I'm sure that can be arranged.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On a similar vein, really, I think this report's pretty self-explanatory, and the only thing I wanted, it also points to a resource shortage in a particular area of the council, in this case mainly in legal services. The only thing I wanted to add to that, really, is that James has been considering this with his team of legal staff and is putting a report together for CLT next week with a proposal to address this particular issue, particularly in relation to the work that sits in legal, in order to support the estates and facilities team here. Other than that, I think the report speaks for itself, but I'm happy to answer any questions at all.
Any question? No. Is it, you moved it? Second. Councillor Bull.
I will just say again, sorry to keep on tonight, but this is one report I found very disappointing. I think to call it a low priority, I can't see any business that would think that the assets that they own is of low priority and insignificant, as the report states. And I think that it was mentioned, it's the legal team and it's the expertise needed there to draft leases and other documentation, but it's taking so long to do. I could cite places in Tansley, in Stockholm, in Hurst Farm, in fact, on leases that have taken years to put through, and it becomes a nonsense. And you know, we should be putting in place the resources there to actually further this, so that we're not holding on for years. I know through experience of late that you know, the cost in legal fees are absolutely horrendous, but we've got to move things along a lot quicker than we have done, and we have to treat our assets, because they are important, our assets are now, with the lack of financing. Where we don't need the assets, we want to be able to transfer them, get rid of the costs. Where we can make money, we need to make a little bit of money. All sorts of things. I don't think a business, a private business, would act on these sort of lines. So can we move on that and put things in place where we're going to actually move things along a lot quicker?
James, would you like to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Flitter. As Tim said when he was introducing the report, I've got a paper on the CLT agenda next week which will seek to address the resource issue in legal services. Hopefully we will have somebody in place by beginning of August to start working their way through this, and it is a significant backlog. Clearly the legal team is not a big team. We've just lost a member of the team, and whilst we're backfilling some of those posts at the moment, there is a gap there. But what we are starting to do is reprioritise some of that work, and it is recognised that whilst we've described it as low, it's been historically low priority, some of that work is now becoming a priority, which is why we want to bring this resource in. So hopefully you'll start to see some progress, certainly in terms of the ones that you've mentioned in the coming months, and I would hope that certainly by this time next year we'll be submitting a different type of report on this issue.
Paul, would you like to comment on that?
Well, just very briefly on the wider issue, if I may, Chair, because the frustration of Councillor Flitter is entirely understandable. But James has reported to CLT that at the moment there's over 500 open cases in legal. All of that is related to the activities of this council, and it does come back to what is a priority, and the council being absolutely clear what its priorities are. Because in response to Councillor Cruz earlier, I mentioned a piece of work that we've just had done. And what that's reported is that the council currently has listed 44 priorities. It's then got legacy projects which we're still trying to implement, and then there's the day-to-day business trying to organise. And to be quite honest, if we're not careful, the council is going to fall over. And some of our key members of staff and some of our key teams are going to fall over. And legal is one of them. Estates is another. We have a lot of teams that are reliant on single individuals. And whilst we have bolstered with member support resources in legal, there's only so much that you can do. And we do need to be very clear what our priorities are moving forward and stick with them. And whilst this report talks about this being a low priority, it doesn't mean it's insignificant or unimportant. But when you're judged against writing contracts for Levelling Up Fund, when you're talking about bringing forward leases for Bakewell Road regeneration, when you're talking about key projects which are very, very significant to the economy of the Derbyshire Dales, when you put this alongside that list, the officer view is that it is of a lower priority. It's not that it's unimportant, but we do have to try and prioritise where our scarce resources are utilised. So, that's just to try and put a little bit of context around the issue. But I do welcome Councillor Flitter's point for a discussion around this with the leaders, because I'll be able to tell you much, much more about the pressures that the organisation is under and what we are currently proposing to do to try and address them.
Thanks for that, Paul. Councillor Purdy.
Chair, thank you. I can't help but say we told you so. When I, with Councillor Hobson, when we became leaders, went round every department, it was patently clear to us that this authority was creaking with single officer stations, even to the point I had to ask the Chief Executive what would happen if he went under a bus tomorrow. And we identified that. We kept sending that message out to you, but your group would not support the Chief Executive's draft report, so that had to be withdrawn. So we've identified this from day one, and here we are now at a critical stage. Okay, the pandemic's got in the way, but it's put more pressure on. So you can't say you've not been told.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the report? Unanimous, yeah. Thank you very much. And the final item is the annual report of Regulatory Investigatory Power Act, RIPSA. James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure this is the report that members have all been waiting for on this agenda tonight.
Absolutely.
But, I'll try and be brief in presenting it. So this is your annual report on the Council's use of the powers that we have under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. To be brief, we haven't used them, which you would expect. We do have procedures in place if we do use them. We will be subject to an inspection shortly on our use and the way that we apply the policy that we have. Members will recall the last time this was reported to Council, there was a recommendation that we adopt a new procedure in terms of the use of corporate social media accounts for the purposes of RIPSA surveillance or inspection, RIPSA surveillance. And what we've done is we've now established the process for that to be done. So I'm more confident now that when we are next inspected that there won't be any challenge to us from the inspector on that provision. Of course, you as members were trained on this last year. CLT and the authorising officers were trained on this last year. So, Chair, I'm simply asking that this report be noted and that members endorse that approach to the use of corporate social media accounts when we do need to use that in future. Thank you, Chair.
Do you move that report? Anybody? Councillor Bolt, Councillor Wakeman.